Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of PDN Live. My name is Shannon, and I'll be your moderator tonight. And our topic tonight is close quarters and integrated defense. And with me, I have Rob Pincus, the Executive Director of Personal Defense Network. And tonight, our special guest is Craig Douglas. Both these guys are experts in extreme close quarters defense and integrated training. So, hey, Craig, how's it going? Glad to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for joining us. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what makes you an expert in the topic tonight, and any other additional information you have about yourself.
Okay. I wouldn't assign the title expert to me as an expert of anything, but I'll give you a thumbnail. So I was a police officer for over 20 years. Most of that time was spent in a drug enforcement assignment, a SWAT assignment, or both. I've been in and out of martial arts for 40 plus years, and I was a soldier back in the 80s when nothing was going on. I started teaching some coursework about 12 years ago, open enrollment, that I call extreme close quarter concepts, and essentially I define that as an overview of functional handgun skills at 0 to 5 feet, which also I like to say requires an inter or multidisciplinary approach to problem solving. So what I try and do is take gun stuff and make it work with hand-to-hand stuff, hand-to-hand stuff and make it work with gun stuff, see how it all coheses together, for lack of a better term, and then try and contextualize that for an average person and then pressure test. So I've done this probably now for, what I teach represents literally my life's work, but I've had a pretty good volume of open enrollment for over a decade, so that's actually gone a long way towards changing coursework here and there, modifying the coursework, and giving me the current product that I have. So that's my background.
Awesome. And if people want to reach out to you after the show, where can they find you on social media networks, websites, companies, that sort of thing?
So you can find a bare bones website that needs much updating, chevworks.com, and then I have a Facebook page called Chevworks and Chevworks Alumni, where you'll see a lot of the students from prior classes come in and post videos of their course experiences and a lot of things that happen in the course, like what we call evolutions, which I'll explain later on.
Awesome. And hello, Rob. How's it going?
It's good. Busy week. Craig, appreciate you being on the show. We've been wanting to get you on here for really since we started. I mean, you're one of the early guests that I know everybody's going to be interested in. I think we have more questions tonight. This is our 5th or 6th PDN Live this year, and more questions tonight that we solicited from our members, obviously from your audience on social media, my audience, than we've had here before. So people are interested in extreme close quarters. Glad to have you on here. Of course, you've done DVDs for us. We've done some video clips, and your work is highly regarded in my audience and in the community, so it's great here. You're a great friend, good collaborator. As for ICE Training Company, we're super busy. I'm up in Massachusetts teaching, kind of one of those behind enemy lines. I love coming up here and supporting Goal. These guys are great. They fight. When you go to Texas and Arizona, everybody's got a gun. When you go to Massachusetts, the 15 guys in the class today, 14 guys and 1 woman in the class today, they all are fighting to own guns, and they're making a lifestyle choice that isn't common and really isn't easy up here. So supporting them is important. Omari Broussard, one of our guys, is with Jeff Mullenmeister in Minnesota doing an instructor development course for the Combat Focus Shooting Program, and Derek Poole and Jamie Onion are over in Colorado at the Bristlecone Range doing an instructor development for the Defensive Firearms Coaches Program, which is mostly comprised of the Bristlecone staff. So the whole range staff there is now going to be teaching ICE programs, which is cool.
Awesome. Like Rob said, this has probably been our most popular topic so far. We have a lot of questions to cover tonight. So thank you for those that have already submitted your questions. If you're listening live, you can type in your questions below, and we'll try to do our best to get around to them during the show. And if you're watching this after the live show, feel free to also put your questions in, and Rob and Craig will do their best to check in throughout the week to answer those questions. You can catch us online at personaldefensenetwork.com, on Facebook at Personal Defense Network, or on Instagram at PD Network. On Twitter, our handle is at P_D_N, and you can sign up for our free newsletter. You can check it out below, and as always, our videos are on our YouTube channel, Personal Defense Net. So let's jump right in, guys. You both have developed and integrated extreme close quarter programs that were originally designed in law enforcement contexts but have been adapted for personal defense. And Craig, can you start us off and talk about that early development and how or why these adaptations were made?
Sure. The early development of the content really focused around the gun more than anything, and I would say my earliest development of the content that I teach now really began with firearms training. So where should the gun be if we're literally close enough to touch another human being? And we experimented with a variety of positions, and we used to do this on ranges. So with a piece of cardboard, and we thought that of course it kind of makes sense that you got to get the gun back somewhere out of arm's reach, have the gun away from your body, maybe, and can you hit anything from there? So over the years, that changed as things became available to us, and I'm going back literally to probably 1992 when I first started looking at alternative shooting positions for an entangled or within arm's reach problem. As products and things started becoming available, we started adapting things that weren't intended originally for these applications. We started looking at protective gear. We started going live with each other. We started using paintballs and things like that. I saw a lot of the things on the range that just didn't pan out the way we thought they would when we started adding pressure and we started adding live bodies and we started adding projectiles. So the context that I had always talked to, obviously being a career police officer, was that of a police officer. But one of the things that really changed for me was a good portion that I spent actually working as an undercover officer. So it was a very different context for me personally, where I wasn't operating under observable color of authority and didn't really have backup that close. So that changed it more towards a citizen's paradigm. And then finally, I had a dear friend who had badgered me for many, many years to try and hang a shingle out. His name is Paul Gomez. He's deceased now, but Paul is the guy that really got me involved with citizen training and looking at the citizen problem. And I found that a lot of my experiences while working undercover actually were directly relatable to what an average person can go through. So, we continued to refine the program and add a little here, delete things here, pressure test. We started looking at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling specifically as delivery systems to be able to acquire the handgun. There were some things I figured out from pressure testing that I didn't really have a delivery system for, and I got exposed to BJJ and MMA and wrestling later in life, unlike some of my contemporaries that assist with this program that I teach. So it kind of came together, and I've been teaching full-time now for 4 years in the private sector, but I've been doing citizen-focused training now for well over a decade. It's actually since 2003.
And Rob, with your law enforcement background, how do you incorporate this into training a non-LE market?
It's funny. My development of the extreme close quarters tactics from my company side and my personal development side really came from the opposite direction. It was inside of a SWAT scenario where we had training that was really emphasizing going through shoot houses, and you find the target, you shoot the target. And then even with simunitions, when we started doing that in the mid to late 90s, going through rooms, shoot somebody. And a lot of it was emphasizing this: what happens when you shoot? The idea being it's the worst case scenario, you hostage rescue, all this concepts that really weren't in play. When I looked around at what most of the SWAT teams around the country were doing, as I got more and more involved in the training community in the late 90s and writing for SWAT Magazine, helping people develop training programs, obviously being in a city where I was on a small SWAT team as well, what was actually happening wasn't running around rooms shooting people. It wasn't turning corners and shooting people. What was happening was wrestling with people. What was happening was pushing people out of the way. What was happening was somebody who tried to get away, and you've got all this gear on, and you've got this long gun, and you've got this pistol on, you've got all this stuff, and now you've got to wrestle. So, now you've got to fight. You're not shooting anybody, but there's guns in play, and the guns really kind of get in the way, and if you had to use them in that entangled environment, we didn't have a solution for that. So it was an opportunity I had in the late 90s working with a SWAT team actually down in Florida to sort of script the scenario trainings, access to simunitions, access to a mount site at a military facility, cinder block rooms and places to go out and train, and being able to script and experiment with, well, wait a minute, let's not worry so much about the shooting in these rooms. What about the wrestling match? What about what actually happens? And we had access to some high gear suits and simunitions, and we wrapped up the MP5s and the ARs with some towels and some duct tape so there weren't too many sharp edges, and we just kind of went at it. And that grew into what became my company's Extreme Close Quarters Tactics program, integrating unarmed defensive skills and contact shooting and the role of law enforcement having to arrest and control. Moving into the early 2000s, a lot of that work was adapted for executive protection guys, taking what was kind of the standards of training, the shove and shoot and the speed rock and some of the other solutions that were out there for, proven, as Craig was talking about, kind of proven on cardboard on a square range environment. That we saw this stuff just not working for entangled and close quarters situations. So started trying to solve those problems. Again, pressure testing. It kind of brought me back to unarmed training because I had kind of given up on practical unarmed training. My background was high school wrestling for a while and stuff like that. So some of the grappling skills were there, but the integration of the grappling skills, the integration of close quarter striking, the integration of the armed work hadn't really been developed. So through the late 90s, early 2000s, developed that, and then had a very unique opportunity to get involved with some of our high-end military units and developed the Extreme Close Quarters Tactics program that was there for law enforcement into the Extreme Close Quarters Counter Ambush program for what happens when the top military guys in the world, as far as I'm concerned, turn a corner, miss something, make a mistake, and somebody gets their hands on them inside of the muzzle of that long gun they've got on their hand. And that development went on for several years, a lot of great work in that community. And in parallel, we really developed the applications for the civilian, for the everyday concealed carry person. Somewhere in that era, the late 2000s, mid-2000s, is actually when I became exposed to Craig's work and found that Craig had really found ways with his mind as in, just dissecting as a tactician and I think a real strategist. What Craig's gift to me was some ways of describing things that I had been seeing in some of these scenarios, some of these pressure testing, some of these videos we had for years and years and years, some of the terminology that he brings to the table and really helped me to explain and define what it was we were doing and trying to teach. So that's why I've really considered him a mentor and a great collaborator in a lot of ways in this material that I've been steeped in for a long time. Today, at this point, we run this program for civilians, law enforcement, and for the military, and there's a lot of overlap. The main difference being whether you're sort of moving towards the bad guy with a long gun or you get jumped by the bad guy with your tools in a concealed condition.
So what was the kind of language that Craig had taught you?
There's two big things that we talk about that are completely credited to Craig and his program with his ECQC, and one of them is something called same side control. I'll let him talk about that. People who are Personal Defense Network viewers have probably seen some of the premium videos on this or seen the DVD, and the other one is in-fight weapons access. We had this concept of clear, control, and counter, the idea that you had to kind of clear yourself from the threat, clear the tool or the weapon that could hurt you away, get some control over that, and then work your way to the point where you could counter. And Craig describes that as in-fight weapons access, that moment when you're looking to gain enough control to be able to access that tool and use it appropriately, whether that's the knife or the handgun or whatever it is. And that was brilliant terminology. And then the idea of same-side control was something that we had seen have to be there for these techniques that we were teaching to work well, but it never really articulated. And maybe, Craig, you can jump in and talk about what that terminology means and how important it is to focus on that moment before in-fight weapons access.
Well, I know you relate to this too. That was the big part, the pressure testing, just making a decision to take the equipment off, maybe use it in ways that weren't necessarily recommended to use, and see what happened.
Yeah.
So, when we started doing that kind of stuff, we really didn't know what we were looking at. Just it looked like dash cam footage, and what you had were probably 8 or 10 guys that were willing to do this, A, because they like to, B, they were interested and curious to see if there was any rhyme or reason in this. And one of the things that emerged was the guys who were in control somehow, some way, seemed to do better at getting their gun out. But we didn't even know what control meant. It took us a long time. And this in and of itself, and probably from when I got out of doing undercover work, so 98 till about 2001, where we just went at it, you know, and we really didn't know what we were doing, and we just kind of developed things. And one of the things that came out was, okay, and I can remember when it happened too, because I think we were at the Gulfport Police Department range one night when everybody had left and we could do our thing. We were trying to make sense, and we stopped a melee between a couple of the guys that were working. And one of the guys said, "Hey, just look, grab that arm before you go for the gun." And it just hit me. Whoa! That's it, man. That's what we've been missing the whole time. Is you have to control the limb of the adversaries closest to the gun before you initiate the presentation. And it took 3 years of basically just, you know, beating the snot out of each other to figure that out without any guidance or anything like that. That was a big thing. That was a big moment. And what's interesting now is, and I know you'll relate to this, when you put that much raw research and development into something, it's very easy for somebody to say, "Oh yeah, well there you go." You know, that totally makes sense. But it took 3 years for us to figure that out in a lot of simulations-based gunfights, you know, with gear and you know, willing to risk, you know, getting hurt. So that was a big thing, man. Was that, and that moment where you know, the same side control the limb closest to the tool. I call that a timing rule. You know, the timing of a presentation has to be such that you control the limb of the adversaries closest to the gun before you initiate the presentation. And once we have that as a driver, okay, now we still don't really have a valid delivery system of wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We're just sort of flailing, and you know, it's a step above mud wrestling almost. I mean, you got tough guys who are strong and fit. You know, you got a modicum of training here and there, but you know, this is before MMA was even MMA. It wasn't MMA. It was still Vale Tudo or NHB. You know, wrestling and boxing and jiu-jitsu hadn't really, you know, coalesced as something like you see it now. So, you know, once we figured that out, all of a sudden the development became, okay, how do we control the limb of the adversaries close to the tool? And that's what led into vertical grappling systems like wrestling or judo or Muay Thai, adapted to this specific problem seen based on the pressure testing to give us the greatest chance of success of getting the gun out. So that's what led to, okay, what do we call this? Well, you're in a fight and trying to get a gun, we call it in-fight weapons access. That's the general name for the entire problem of a contact range or entangled presentation. So, and I know you know this, you know, there's a lot of time where you're just in the dark, and then all of a sudden there's a little glimmer of light, and then a little glimmer more, and then all of a sudden, boom, the lights come on, and you can see everything. It's weird when you're developing something like this from the ground up, because we found the existing solutions, like you already, you know, stated, Rob, of shove and shoots and speed rocks and all the stuff we did on cardboard. When we put on that gear, man, that didn't work.
Right.
That didn't work.
Yeah, it was when that was the light for me was when, like I said, we had access to that SWAT team I was working for had bought some high gear suits. Of course, that put me in touch with Tony Blauer and looking at some of the stuff he was doing. You know, I think it was about the same era that I went through Hoist Gracie, because, you know, these were the early days of UFC, as you said. I went through his law enforcement grappling school, but it was all disconnected, right? And it was all, so, okay, so I had my grappling skills over here, and I had some Muay Thai, and then I had some crazy, you know, PPCT or whatever the, you know, academy taught.
Right, exactly.
And then we had these shooting skills, and we were just throwing it all together. And So, of course, we thought we had it figured out, right? I thought clear control counter, good. I thought we're good. And then I met you, and I heard the same side control, and I'm like, I don't know about this guy. The same side control. And I went back, and I started looking at the videos, those that described as a dash camera, showing them this guys, and they're like, what are you, that's not training. What are you doing there? You're just rolling around in the ground. Like, well, we're figuring it out. And I went back and looked at the videos, and sure enough, you know, what I'm yelling or what somebody else is doing in roll coaching with the high gear suit on, got to control this hand, got to control this hand. You can't get your gun out, and we're blocking and all of a sudden that hand would get knocked out of the way or pulled out of the way or pushed out of the way or tied out of the way, and boom, the gun comes out and the shot's beautiful or pinned up against the wall. And that's what you described. And I had to go back and watch, you know, samples from years of videos in military and law enforcement settings to be able to say, fuck, he has figured it out. You know, that's it. It's called same side control, and it's brilliant, and good job. So yeah, it's interesting rolling around and just trying to figure it out. And when that light bulb comes on and then you start figuring out, pulling it together. The other thing that you do, and I'm stepping all over Shannon, I'm sure she has a question to go, but I'm going to hand it back to you. Go ahead, because Craig and I could probably go back and forth all night.
Well, I mean, this kind of goes into the question that I had. We had someone write in, Martin, and you're talking about the same side and training and being in the dirt. So what type of close quarters training can Martin do with his carry gun that will best improve his survival skills? You know, think that he's being on a shooting range, no limits, but trying to simulate those fighting extreme close quarters. How can he train?
This kind of training is hard to do solo. You can do some of the static things like where the gun should be. You can do that. And I think it's a good idea to do that. And I do that in my coursework. I think Rob's is similar too as far as the structure of it. There's some live fire. There's usually a break after the live fire, and then it goes to some kind of contact work. I think that's how both of our courses are. It's either a day and a day, something like that. But nonetheless, just having the experience of shooting with a gun that close, that's really disconcerting if you've never done that before. And being that close to the target, all that bat blast that close to your body, it's not harmful, but it is disconcerting. So getting those experiences, I would not do that without somebody qualified in bringing you through a progression up to where you are safely drawing and firing from the holster in one fell swoop. I have a very specific progression I teach for that. I know Rob does too, but nobody that I know of who's credible starts off just going, all right, whip it out, you know, and then shooting. That's just not the way it works. There's a safe way to do this. So it's hard to do this kind of training without a coach. I would say that, you know, a good way to do it, if you want to follow your own path of self-discovery and probably come to some of these same conclusions, you know, if you have a person who's willing to wrestle with you a little bit, get a blue gun or a red gun, you know, watch some DVDs. There are a lot of online resources. Videotape yourself, and if it looks kind of like a real fight, you're probably training correctly. Most of the evolutions that I do, which that's my term for the day's validation exercises and evolution. If you do that stuff right, it kind of looks like dash cam footage or security footage. Just you don't see anything clean unless you know what you're looking for. You know, it just looks like a big dog pile. You know, and a lot of dust and a lot of grunting, and occasionally a shot or two is fired with the sun guns and things like that. So, I think that's probably a good thing to do is find a partner and get a red gun or a blue gun. But it's really hard to do ECQ. ECQ training is truly an interactive niche. You have to have a body, I think, to really develop in this. Rob may have some different opinions on that, but I don't think you can do this training just as statically and without a partner.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to really get an appreciation for the nuances of just how hard this is, because you hear a lot, you know, for years, like I can keep going back, speed rock and chub and shoot, for years, like that made sense, except it doesn't, because the minute, you know, I'll tell you, even the difference between, like when I'm off in some like obscure range and we're running an ECQT course and we're doing our live fire on cardboard, there's a difference, you know, up against a piece of cardboard versus I like to, whenever we can, use a three-dimensional mannequin that we can shoot into that has clothes, that the cotton starts burning, you feel that heat come back off it, you're on a three-dimensional mannequin. But what's incredibly important, can't stress enough, Craig emphasized that, I'm going to re-emphasize it, you got to have at least a spotter. Because the problem is you've got this other arm wrapped around the mannequin somewhere, you've got the angle of the gun, and you need someone to, and we spot check it. Prior to touching the trigger, when you believe you're in the right position to shoot, somebody comes in and checks the alignment of the muzzle, checks the position, and we administratively pull this hand back out of the way from wherever it got to in the wrestling match and let you fire. One thing you can do is take the exact model that Craig talked about, wrestling with your buddy, but use something like a SIRT pistol or a laser light training pistol, something that's going to give you that red laser dot. And as long as you're videoing, if you have the right angles, you get a wide angle, now you can sort of freeze at the moment you thought you shot him. And if that you'd be surprised when that red laser dot's on the wall, nowhere near the guy, when you thought you had some kind of a body index, as opposed to the red laser dot shows up on the guy. So that's something you can go to that next level. But honestly, you know, get to a class. There aren't a lot of guys doing a lot of work that I would consider really progressive, valid, legitimate in this field. But if you're serious about it, you know, Craig's you're running this class once a month, I'm sure. I offer a couple times a year.
I think I'll teach this year, Rob, probably 27 or 28 ECQs.
Yeah, so, you know, there's opportunities out there for people who are serious about this. Craig obviously did a great DVD with Personal Defense Network on the concepts. I've got the Extreme Close Quarters Shooting DVD, which doesn't talk as much about the striking pieces or the grappling pieces, but it talks a lot about fighting into the positions. There is information out there, but the best thing you can do is get out there and come to a class.
So we've talked about being in a class, and then say you've done the training. What a lot of people want to know about you, Rob, is what is your preferred carry technique or position on your body? What style of rig holster system do you typically use, you know, with the season and your clothing, and anticipating for what type of a fight you might go into? How do you set yourself up for that?
Like a lot of people have over the last, you know, 5+ years or so, I've moved to exclusive carry, what I call centerline carry. Common term is appendix inside the waistband. I started talking about centerline carry a lot with alternative tools, like a knife, particularly. The idea that we can, and again, a lot of this work comes from the extreme close quarters, right? We can access it with both hands. It's there. It's when you're grappling with somebody, you can kind of sneak in. You don't have to take this hand away from the fight so much to get into it. You can use your torso to create space when you close your hips, put your upper body against them, create space to get to those tools. A lot of reasons that's a great carry position. I only used to use it going back into the 90s. I'd use it in low-profile executive protection settings where you're in a situation maybe with a crowd and you didn't want somebody, you know, quote-unquote bump frisking you or finding a gun tucked at the 4 o'clock behind your waist. That's when I started using it in a belly band, with like a J-frame holster or something. And I did a lot of work with belly bands over the years. Of course, I developed an advanced, I think an evolved version of a belly band that uses a Kydex and leather-backed attachment piece to the band, so you can train with it easier. Reholstering is kind of impossible in a typical belly band, so we developed that with crossbreed holsters. And I use a crossbreed holster a lot. I've done a lot of work with Spencer Keepers recently, checking out his holsters. I carry an XDS, a single stack 9mm 4-inch gun in that centerline carry position. It's a great gun for kind of every day, under a t-shirt, under a polo shirt, under whatever. I've evolved to my thought process on carrying a gun over the years a lot, as many people have. You know, I used to be a 1911 guy. I used to be a 40 Smith & Wesson guy. Definitely evolved to the point where I think the 9mm is a great choice for personal defense, and I think appendix carry or centerline carry is a great choice for a lot of people. It's not a tenable choice for some people because of the way they dress or their body style or whatever. And for some people, they want to carry a bigger gun than they can carry comfortably there. I get that. They want to carry a double stack gun. I've carried double stack guns there. I find myself feeling confident and comfortable with a single stack gun there, and it's more comfortable to wear every day. Right?
I'm usually carrying a Glock 19 or a Walther PPS, and I probably carry the PPS more than anything else. Again, single column gun, great shooting pistol. You know, I had it for a few years before the Glock 43 came out, so that's usually what I carry. And I carry centerline, and I almost exclusively carry holsters that Spencer makes. I like his stuff. I helped co-develop that holster, you know, tweak it a little bit. So I like his stuff, and I like the small striker-fired 9mm guns. So,
Craig, we had a viewer ask. His name is William. He's been looking at target-focused training videos, and they recommend not going for a gun if it's pointed at you. they they recommend to put them through injury so they're not focusing on what you want to do in the first place. What tactics do you employ in the event you can't access your weapon quickly to avoid getting shot in the process?
So read that one more. I'm assuming that the person is asking about a disarm attempt, like you're being held at gunpoint. So yeah, and that's a common thing. First of all, there's no reason that you have to fight back necessarily, and that's a controversial thing to say. Okay, but I will tell you this: in a little around 2 years of buying drugs, I was robbed about 9 times at gunpoint. So I'm very familiar with what a robbery looks like, and in one of those, I actually went for a gun. So, you know, there's no guarantee that a robbery is going to, you know, necessarily mean that you're going to be shot or not be shot. That's a very subjective thing to, you know, opinion to make, or move to make, I should say. I'll say this: if you have to make a move, you probably want to make the move when he's talking. You probably want to get your hands as close to a gun as possible before making a move. Feigning supplication or submission works well for drawing a gun in. So, and then as far as the move to make, the first thing is not getting shot. So you're going to have to move the gun as you move your body somehow or another. And from that point forward, whether you punch him in the face while holding the gun, whether you strip the gun out of his hand, whether you access a pistol of your own or access a weapon of your own, that's really about it. It's not a lot to gun disarms. Really, the big thing is, should you do it?
Mm-hmm. And then, Rob, what do you think about showing your weapon as a way of possibly ending a confrontation before having to draw it?
I am not, you know, there's always going to be an exception. Certainly anecdotally, we can hear a lot of stories about times people warded off evil with their guns, the talisman. Generally speaking, I don't think it's a great idea to sort of tip your hand. I certainly think it's a horrible idea to think that you can carry a gun with the intention of being able to scare somebody off, and that's always my concern. If someone is very serious about this training, if someone understands that, you know, what it means to carry a gun and the responsibility that goes with using that gun as a lethal defensive tool, and they happen to find a circumstance that, based on their training and their reading of the situation, they believe they can go to a ready position and, you know, dissuade someone, they don't have to go directly to shooting, awesome, great, win the day without shooting. But for that person who's maybe just watching this video as their first, you know, primer on personal defense and self-defense, or somebody who comes to Personal Defense Network, buys one of the books or something, the idea that a gun is just going to scare someone away, I don't buy into it, and I don't think it's a great way to go into owning a gun or carrying a gun. So that's what I'm always leery of. We know that there are so many psychological stops. We know that people pull guns and shoot and miss, and the bad guys run away a lot. People get wounded and stop fighting and really wounded, but turn around and don't die for 2 hours. They just run away and drop the knife. Those are all psychological stops, and brandishing a gun can result in a psychological stop. I don't think it's the best way to use a gun, and I don't think that should be your intention. Same thing with, like, you know, the idea of putting a laser on your gun so you can scare somebody away, something like that. A gun is a lethal defensive tool, and while it can have a psychological effect, we need to be very aware of the physiological effect that is there impotent in it, and bringing a gun into a fight that you don't intend to use is always going to be a mistake.
What about you, Craig? What are your thoughts on that?
On, I'm sorry, ask the question.
Brandishing a weapon to possibly stop an attack, but not actually using your firearm.
I think that happens a lot. I think people, and I think people probably point guns at people and successfully ward them off, then shoot. That being said, I would agree with Rob that when you draw a gun, that's not your intention. That, hey, I'm coming out to scare you with my pistol. You know, you're not. I don't think we should use a handgun to bluff, but I think, you know, a good aggressive draw, and I certainly know this from being a police officer. You know, a good aggressive, decisive draw on somebody can quite often, you know, make them think about doing something else. You know, if they buy it, they buy it, and if you have gravitas when you present that firearm, that may very well keep you from having to shoot somebody. Wouldn't count on it, Wouldn't count on it. Wouldn't draw the gun with the intention of scaring or bluffing. But it happens quite a bit, and I think if you I think if you can not shoot someone and solve the problem, that's a good thing.
Yeah. For those of you that are just joining us, this is PDN Live. Our topic tonight is close quarters and integrated defense. With me I have Rob Pincus and Craig Douglas, both experts in extreme close quarter defense and integrated training. If you like what you're seeing and hearing, sign up for our free newsletter. The link is down below. Rob, you and Craig have been friends and collaborators for a number of years. Can you share anything specific that you've learned from one another and integrated into your own classes?
I think that kind of overlaps with some of the stuff we talked about before. I think the biggest things are the same side control, just the awareness that is so important to articulate. So again, we used to use the terminology of clear yourself from the threat, or clear the threat, the gun or the knife from you, and then get some kind of control, and then counter as appropriate. And sometimes that counter was a strike, sometimes it meant go after your gun. But what was missing from that explanation, again, was this importance of, if your choices respond as appropriate by getting your gun out, then your control has to be focused on not just controlling the knife or the gun or whatever that lethal threat was, but also controlling the bad guy's ability to counter what you're about to do. Now, I think one of the interesting things is, and I think it's maybe the place that Craig and I differ, is I like to only do those full pressure tests, the full like gear, simunitions, all that, with what I call in-role coaching and role players, as opposed to student on student. Because the thing I always fear is that when you're working against that other student, or when you're working against the person who kind of knows your move, they can try to counter your move. And that creates this kind of circle of guys trying to stop each other, as opposed to guys trying to do what they came to a motivation in a true fight would do, as opposed to just stopping them from accessing their move. So that same side control applied to this idea of making sure you can get to your gun when you want to get to your gun was really inspirational, and like I said, a pivotal moment for my evolution of what we do. And that's totally Craig, and that terminology, in-fight weapons access. There's been I think Craig's ability, like I said earlier, to dissect what's happening in a fight and then explain it definitely inspired me to pay more attention to the minute-to-minute that my students were doing, as opposed to the outcome of where the students got to.
Gotcha. So a lot of questions that we've gotten in have been a lot on gear, so I kind of want to shift topics here and talk about firearms. And Rob, what is your opinion on the smallest and easy self-defense gun for a smaller person?
Hand size is going to be infinitely more important than body type. We had a guy on the range this week who, big guy, not obese, not giant, but a big guy and stout. But he had tiny little thumbs, so he had these tiny little thumbs that he was trying to run a gun with a manual safety, and he was running it with his weak hand, pushing down on that safety, as opposed to his strong hand thumb, because there was just no way his thumbs were going to fit on that gun, and it was a pretty narrow gun. So hand size. So when somebody says a small person, I don't know that there's a better gun or a worse gun for a person who's 5'4" versus a person who's 5'9". What I do know is that hand fit on a gun is incredibly important. It really has so much to do with reliability and shootability. The gun has to be inherently reliable, but if you have a guy who isn't holding a gun well, or a woman who isn't holding a gun well, then the gun can be inherently reliable. They can actually cause malfunctions because of an unsupported platform. They can have trouble manipulating safeties if they're there. Of course, we don't recommend guns with manual safeties, but they can have trouble with good position on the trigger. They can have trouble managing recoil. They can have trouble actuating the magazine release. So hand fit's incredibly important. I have found that the Springfield XD line fits more hands for smaller people, the guns we recommend and that we see people be very successful with. Thousands of students, thousands of classes, we recommend M&P, Glock, or the Springfield XD line, and the Springfield XD fits the smaller hands best. The M&Ps would be the next thing, and then the Glocks really just don't do well with people with smaller hands, generally speaking. So I would say, look towards one of the XDs. And this isn't just an issue of single stack versus double stack. That's inherent in the problem, but there's something about the girth of the top of the grip area and the deepness of the cut under what we would say is like the beaver tail or the back of the frame that has a lot to do with the way people can get a better grip on that gun with smaller hands. Craig, what have you seen?
I really didn't pay attention to it until you just said something about the smaller hands with the XDs. But I have to concur because I see a lot of female students coming in with XDs, or a lot of guys who do have small hands that are shooting XDs. Never really thought about that actually until this moment, but you're right, absolutely. Um, I would really not. I can't really offer anything that you haven't already stated, Rob. I think hand size, finger and thumb length. We've always talked about hand size, but we never really talked about, like you said, short digits. And I have that same problem. I'm one of those guys that always has to turn the gun to his thumb. I never have been able to reach over there, and hit that without breaking the web of my hand from the tang of the gun. I'm always a turner. So. Hand size, finding something that works well for you. That being said, hand size and feel in a gun store is really subjective. I know when we started getting guns with interchangeable back panels of whatever manufacturer, you'd play with all these back panels and side panels and things like that, and you'd be like, ooh, this feels really good. Then you'd get on the range, and you'd be like, wow, I'm having a hard time controlling that pistol. So maybe you get a larger one. It doesn't feel quite as good, but you notice that your recoil control is better. That's something I've learned with, playing around with like the HK pistols, where you can switch the side, the side panels out and the back straps. And they're like 20, 30 different combinations that you can all put together. You start realizing that subjective feel without any recoil mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
It can be really deceptive. So, I think if you have a gun store where you can feel and shoot, some of your better gun stores, some of the larger metropolitan areas, that's really the way to go. Shop around. There are plenty of good service pistols that are, I know, are not mine or Rob's preference, but they're perfectly good guns. They really are.
So, Craig, Gary asked, do you recommend carrying a tactical pen? Do you have any experience with those? Do you train or offer training in how to employ it?
I don't look. Actually, I got a funny story about that. So, tactical, yeah, it's not what you were thinking, Rob, but it's yeah, it went at the doctor's office. So, a friend of mine had one of these pens, and we're both teaching at a conference. And we're flying out the next day, and the TSA guy, my friend, had his pen in his carry-on bag, and it goes through, and the TSA guy pulls the pen out and looks at him and says, I know what this is. It's got dual use. You can either bin it, ship it to yourself, but you're not getting on that airplane with it. And, of course, he, tossed it away. It wasn't any big deal because it had been given to him. But that was kind of it for me in tactical pens. I think they have... I've played with those in the past as something viable, but I never could get enough weight. I don't think you have to have a tactical pen to be tactical with a pen. I think you'd probably get a good Sharpie or something that's relatively pointy that you don't have to spend, $80 on, unless you just have a pen fetish. And then, do your business with it. But I wouldn't subscribe or include a specific tactical pen in my inventory, no, generally.
Rob, do you have any experience with the tactical pens in training or using one?
I think I went through that same kind of experimentation and thought process that really parallels that. There's some videos people can see at personaldefensenetwork.com talking about pens as impact devices. You have a good metal cross pen. It's going to be more low profile. That's the whole idea, right? Well, it's a non-permissive environment. You can't carry your gun, can't carry a knife, so I'm going to carry a pen. Well, TSA is probably going to figure out that your pen that has sharp edges and round and big knobs, and that's probably a weapon if you want it to be. The theme for the Polypalooza Tactical Conference Craig and I taught at in August, one of the theme kind of catchphrases was any tool is a weapon if you hold it right. And I think that's true of a pen or, the Sharpie or whatever. And if you have that tactical pen, they're cool, they're fun, but they're not any better probably. And in some ways more liability there than a regular good stout metal pen.
So then what would you think would be the best knife for everyday carry to use as a backup weapon going away from the whole tactical pen?
Rob?
Craig, you go first.
Well, I'm kind of biased because I've got some knives I've designed. I like to shill, I really do, but I've got a knife I designed called the clinch pick, and it's specifically designed for an entangled problem. It's probably legal in most places. It's a pretty short blade. I think the blade length is like right at 2 3/8, something like that, 2 3/8 of an inch. It's got a small egg-shaped handle, and it's got a downward draw, and it's specifically designed to get out of a clinch with, and it sits in unoccupied. The way I recommend carrying, you can carry it any way you want, but it sits in typically unoccupied space for someone that carries a handgun, and it's a hips forward small blade knife. We have trainers that we make for them. We have guys that actually plug the trainers into the evolutions, and it's very, very difficult to keep that little knife from coming out. Even like dogpiled in the floorboard of a car, you can probably get that knife out. You can. So I'd recommend my own stuff that I've designed and believe in.
I would ask Rob this question, but for those of you that tuned in with Alessandro Padovani's talk, he brought out a bag of knives and showed off all of his knives. So
yeah, I think the trick with the clinch pick is make sure you get the training, you get the trainer, and work with it because it is a unique knife, and it's excellently designed for what it's intended for.
Awesome. So Pete asked, would you rather carry a good knife or good collapsible baton, especially with both of you being with law enforcement backgrounds? But I think it's pretty safe to say that we've answered that question as well, unless you guys have any thoughts on that.
You know, I actually went through a phase over the last 6 months where I was carrying a very lightweight short lightweight version of the ASP as an alternative force tool, and there's a lot of legalities and issues that come into play with expandable baton people need to be careful of. I think they're great tools. I think that especially the lightweight small ones in a back pocket, in a jacket pocket, even tucked centerline can be great for that, whatever that thing is, even like a dog or something where in a suburban environment where, you know, wearing a knife is an everyday tool. So give me a choice between a knife and a club. I can use the knife 20 different ways, plus as a defensive tool. But there's some use for an expandable baton, I think, and there's a place for that as well if it's legal, you know, wherever you happen to be living.
I didn't have very good luck with expandable batons in my career, and I know plenty of guys that have. I didn't, and I used one more than once. Bent them on people that just were willing to take the punishment. So I like. And they're not legal in most jurisdictions, unfortunately. But I like old school blackjacks and saps. I really do. You know, something around 10 ounces. You know, flat, covered in leather that just packs a wallop. I like those a lot. And if I had my druthers and they were legal, you know, in all 50 states, I'd probably carry a blackjack over a knife, you know, as a weapon, other than carrying a knife as a tool.
I know that you spent a lot of time in Europe also, Craig, and over there, you know, every time I'm over there and I see those guys pull out those little change purses for a lot of the European coin money, they look an awful lot like a sap. Just saying. Yep.
Yeah, a bunch of, you know, probably a quarter pound of euros in a thick wallet like that. That's a nice shot. You know, it's a cash essentially is what it is.
Absolutely.
So are there any other things like the cash or the European coin purses that people could utilize as a backup or a tool for a close quarter confrontation?
I'll say this about that thought process. I've had a lot of people come in over the years, and I get a lot of, like Rob, get a lot of return business. And typically what I will see is a guy who comes in and he carries a gun and a backup gun, and he carries a knife and a backup knife, and he has all this accoutrement on his body, and he's got training variations and iterations and drones and inert items that he actually wants to do the you know, contact work in. And you know, typically what we see, I mean, it looks like there was an explosion at a 5-11 kiosk, and you've got a sim gun over here and a small fixed blade knife over here and a folder over here and a J-frame that he called me ahead of time and asked me to bring 38 sim for so he could use his J-frame in the evolution. So I brought those for him, cleared the gun and everything. And what you start realizing is, you know what? There's no free lunch. It's available to you and it's available to him. So one of the effects, I think, of really diving deep into extreme close quarters or entangled training is the realization that less is more. It really is. Less is more. And what I see people do over the year and have done over the years is they've actually pared their loadout down. You see them carry less. They have more skill. They're fitter. They're stronger. They understand the game. They've got a little bit of martial arts or wrestling or boxing or what have you. They just don't carry as much stuff. You know, it's still a lifestyle to them, but it's a different lifestyle. It's not nearly as tool focused and gear focused. Gear is important. It is. I mean, we want to have good gear that works, good, robust, simple gear. You know, but we don't steer that way in this niche. We steer towards fitness and skill. That's what we like.
So it's very interesting because we've had two questions come in for older people or people confined to wheelchairs, or they also live in a state like California where they're unable to carry guns. So they are somewhat fit, but how could they prepare themselves for a close quarter situation, combat close quarters sort of thing, with their limitations?
If anything, I would say that a person, and I've had students confined to wheelchairs, and they were willing, and we did evolutions where we literally knocked them out of their chair and had them fight. And if there's anyone who is actually probably got an advantage as far as upper body strength, is people that exclusively have upper body strength and have to use their upper body to move themselves around. So I've seen people like that that are particularly have really insane hand strength, things like that. They may not have any legs, may not have any wheels, they don't have any mobility. Man, they got some hand strength. You know, those kind of people right there. I think wrestling in particular, and modifications to horizontal grappling, BJJ, Sambo, I don't care what it is, catch can wrestling, modification to that content I think is really worthwhile for them. And if they can't carry a gun, then probably the next thing they can do is get a hold of a guy and choke him until that guy is out. That's about all we got.
And then on the same topic, Rob, have you ever had a student in your class where they used a cane, and have you ever taught anything or techniques for people that walk with a cane and using that as a tool?
Yeah, it was actually a big niche thing for a while that I got into. One of the guys I worked with during the Valhalla era, Tom Foreman, had actually developed a defensive cane kind of program for executives that travel, and I've carried a hooked wooden cane at times when I've traveled in Europe or different cities. A hooked wooden cane is a great tool. We've had plenty of students, you know, from the gun classes. We've had plenty of, you know, like Craig was talking about, disabled students coming through the extreme close quarters class. One of the things I said in the debrief today of the 2-day pistol class, you know, students always say, what training should I take next? And I talk about, one of the things I say is, you know, well, you've just taken what I think is a great pistol class. The next pistol class makes you a pistol hobbyist. You know, go take a medical class, go take an unarmed class, take a class like ECQC from Craig or ECQT from us. And a lot of times we get like well, I'm not fit enough, or I'm not strong enough, or I'm an elderly guy, or I'm weak, or I'm frail, or I'm this. I'll be honest with you, I get it. Like most of the people that come to the class from my side, and Craig can comment too, I guess, but from me, most of it is the fit guys, the guys who are into fighting, the guys who have martial arts backgrounds. But the people who probably need that the most, the people who don't have inherent strength and inherent skills already, are the people that haven't done a bunch of that training, haven't done a bunch of that work. They're the ones that are maybe most likely to be targeted in some ways, and certainly the ones that are most likely to need skill and technique and that mental preparedness to fight in that clinch, entangled, close quarters situation.
And I totally agree with what Rob said. And to follow on that, the oldest student I've had in my coursework that rolled around in the dirt wearing a fist helmet with a T-gun shooting marking cartridges was 71 years old. 71 years old, this guy got out and gave just as good as he got, you know. You don't have to be strong or fit or even like doing this kind of coursework, but you need the experience and you need the exposure of feeling another human being on top of you, because there is nothing that, to steal some language from my peers, Chris LeBlanc, I think he got it from Force Science Institute, but there's nothing that really connotes an opposing will with malevolent intent better than an entangled confrontation, where you can feel someone's strength, you can hear their words, and you don't have to do well. It may very well bother you. You may not like how you feel about yourself after the experience, but you need that experience, because the first time to feel that terror when somebody tears a gun out of your holster is not when it happens for real. Do this in controlled circumstances with professionals that can say, all right, calm down, don't vomit, it's just training, okay? How do you feel about what happened? Blah, 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 blah. And you can have this experience. I like this experience for so many people because it provides a lot of introspection and a lot of contemplation about what they want to do with this experience. Where do they want to go with it? They want to, ignore it, pretend like it didn't happen, stick their head in the sand. They want to get fitter. They want to have a healthier lifestyle. Now, I don't think Rob and I would profess to be life coaches, but if a little bit of entangled shooting helps somebody lose some weight, that's probably a good thing.
Very good words, and a great way to round out the top of the hour. We've talked about training, what to carry, scenarios, firearms, equipment. Thank you so much, Craig, for being on the show and talking about close quarters and integrated defense. Tell us about where people can train with you. What do you have going on for the rest of the year? Do you have any other classes available?
Yes, I do. So I'm going to be in Albuquerque, New Mexico this weekend teaching. I'm going to be off for Halloween, and then I've got 3 classes in the Southeast, 2 in Georgia, and 1 in Louisiana, and that's going to be it for the year for me. Taking the whole month of December off except 1 closed course. And then I think we're up to 33 classes for 16. 16 is actually almost completely booked out, but the schedule is available on the Facebook page, ShivWorks and ShivWorks Alumni, or on the actual website, shivworks.com. So I'm going to be somewhere probably close to a viewer where they can do this training, and certainly, Rob probably teaches more than I know. He teaches more than I do. So.
Yeah, Rob, what do you have going on for the rest of the year?
The rest of the year, I'm finishing up an advanced pistol handling class here in Massachusetts the next couple days. Then I'm heading over to Europe with Alessandro Padovane for a couple classes. I'll be back doing SWAT Roundup International, doing some law enforcement training in Florida. Then I'll be back at the home range in St. Augustine, Florida, for a series of classes, a rifle class, I think an advanced pistol handling class. Thanksgiving break comes up, and then I'll be back in Florida again doing our new applied tactics courses, our ADAV, our armed defense around vehicles, and then we've also got couples class we're running on, and we say it's a couples class, but it's really 2-person armed defense. So if you're like a lot of people in our community that spend time with someone else who's armed, a coworker, a buddy, or the husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, it's interesting to go through the coursework when you have to communicate. So we add to the actual deployment of the firearm skills, the aftermath skills, the recognition skills, all that stuff. Now you have to communicate, cooperate, coordinate with someone else. It adds a lot to it. So we're doing that class also coming up in December. I'll take a couple weeks off for Christmas, and then we're planning the 2016 Personal Defense Network Tour. Final touches on that. People will learn more about that probably in our PDN Live that we're going to do in December. That'll kick off, and we'll probably have our typical 50, 60 courses next year, but not as many in this extreme close quarters work. If this is really what you want, chances are you're going to find Craig and the people that he works with offering that a lot more often. But we do have ECQT a couple times on the schedule next year as well.
Awesome. And where can people find you on social media?
Everywhere.
Rob is social media. Are you kidding?
Wrong. Something's wrong. Pincus Rob at Twitter, Pincus Rob at IG, Rob Pincus Pro at Facebook. Of course, all through PersonalDefenseNetwork.com. That's the best place. See the videos of Craig, see the videos of me, the articles and stuff on all this stuff. PersonalDefenseNetwork.com obviously has the training info for the tour, and ICEtraining.us has the info for the rest of the team and myself that do the classes outside of the tour months.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us. And for those of you that are listening and still have more questions, please feel free to reach out to these guys online on social media. We'll be posting this video to PDN's YouTube after this, so it'll be PD Network, I believe, is the YouTube. Personal Defense Net is the YouTube channel. So check it out there and post your questions, and the guys will be on throughout the next couple days checking it and answering. If not, just find them online. And thank you so much, guys. And until next time, if you have any suggestions for topics for this PDN Live, just feel free to drop us a line, and don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.